Hello, welcome back to Art Club Takeaways. This is week 2. Brilliantly, the sun has just started coming through my window, so I'm going to try really hard not to get blinded as I'm talking to you. Anyway, hang on. This week, you might have opened your box already. This week, we're looking at painting. Except I don't want you to paint a picture. Paint a picture. If what you want to do is paint a picture, you go for it. What I want us to do this week is look at brushes and watercolour paints and different materials to paint on. So you will see that there are lots of different things. There is, of course, paper, and like I always say, the things in here are for you to use however you want, in whatever way you want. So I give you some ideas. I give you some things to try. If you don't fancy it, don't do it. Do what you want the first time, and then maybe once you've spent a bit of time painting or using the materials in the way you want, then perhaps come back and give the ideas that I've got a bit of a go, because we'll be practicing, and these are things that might help you in the future. Use your brush differently, think about paints differently, think about surfaces, materials, fabrics, papers, wood. There's all sorts of things in here. So I'll stop waffling and get on. First of all, let's talk about this brush. Now, it's kind of square and it's kind of big, but you can make very thick or very thin lines with this brush, and there's something exciting in this pack to help you practice. Now it's weird stuff. It's kind of, I don't think I'm going to call it magic paper. I know it's not paper, I know it's kind of fabric. And on one side it's very fleecy. And this is not the side we're going to use. We're going to use this grey side. And all we need is some water. So before you start anything with any paints, if you could give this a go, just so you can get used to the brush. You might have other brushes at home that you want to bring and use in this way too. I'll show you. So I've stuck it. Do you remember my board? Here we go, the stock board. So I've stuck it, this is this one. Can you see it's the green underneath? And I've stuck it grey side up, excuse me, on my board. Now, can you hear my water? I'm making my brush wet. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to take my brush and I'm going to drag it up the side of my glass. Can you see? I mean, if I was being naughty, I could flick my water. I won't do that. Anyway, so you're just getting it wet, but you're not making it soaking. You're sort of taking off all the extra bits of water. Now, back to this. So yes, this is the magic paper. Now, with this brush and the water, I want you to practice the lines that you can make. I'm going to have to do another cough. Hang on. Maybe I'll have another cup of tea. Sorry. Don't mind me. Okay, so if you hold the brush flat, you can make quite a wide line. I've run out of water already, look. I'll go back in. Now, what I don't want you to do is push your brush. Because if you push, you find that the marks you make, you're not really in control so much. So I want you to hold it quite lightly and just try to just get the brush part, just the bristly bit down. And then I want you to try something else. So again, I'm going in and I'm wiping the edge. Now I'm going to hold the brush this way. So this, can you see how, if you hold it sideways, it's very, very thin. This way, it's very thick, and I can make a great big thick line. But if I hold it sideways and aim to put the corner of the brush onto my paper. So I'm aiming for this corner going down, and I'm going to try and go this way. Instead of this way, flat, I'm trying to hold it up and just put that corner down. I hope you can see that, because what happens is with that corner, you can make a thin line. Now you can practice with how hard you push, because if I hardly press at all, it's quite thin, but if I press harder, it becomes thicker. And then you can practice seeing what sort of sizes of marks you make. So you could completely cover it with water. Now the brilliant thing is you can already see it happening. It dries off. So if you pop this on the radiator, even for a minute, I think you'll find it will dry off and you can go again. In the meantime, just practice with your brush. See if you can fill up the whole paper with lots of different marks. Can you move fast? If you move slow, what happens? Can you bring it round corners? If it starts to dry off, you can see the brush strokes. When you come to adding paint, you might really want these kind of marks, this kind of texture. And this is a brilliant way to practice. It's a brilliant way to practice how heavy you are with your brush. You can be very, very light. You can be heavy, but you'll find after a while, if you're really heavy, your brush will be a bit ruined. Often you can save it in the water by dibbling it around and then pulling it across the side of your glass or a jam jar, whatever you've got with your water in. So the other thing to say is, when you start to use your paints, make sure you change the water quite a lot. You have to carry it carefully, and you might have to, see mine's already gone, there's probably paint in the bottom of my glass. You probably have to swizzle around inside with your brush, tip it out and get clean water. So let's talk about the paints I've given you. These are, you won't all have the same colours, but I've given you how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 little blocks of watercolour paint. Now, it's maybe good to put them on a plate, on a saucer. If you get the bottom bit wet, you might find you can stick them down a little bit. They're watercolour paints. Your saucer, your plate will completely dry off. You might find they're a bit annoying and they wibble around the plate as you're trying to use the water. But what I want you to experiment when you get to the paints, after you've practiced with your brush, is how much water do you need to make different types of paint. So take a piece of paper. Again, I've given you a big long piece. So I've taken a piece and I've put it on there. Now, I think I've just got brown. It's not very exciting. You haven't got any brown. I think you've got much better, more exciting colours. But I'm going to go on with a little bit of water and see what happens. Not much. So I might have to go with loads and loads of water and then see what happens. Still, it's pretty light. So work out, do I need perhaps less water and more paint? I'm going over and over and over and over with my brush on the paint. And it starts to come. So the first time, it will take a while. So it's easy enough with your paint to really get your brush in there. Now, again, I'm not pushing. I'm using the sides of my brush and I'm getting that covered in the paint. Can you see? So that way, I'm finding out how much paint to get on my brush. And then when I get my paper, I'm finding out how the paint goes on the surface. Now, I'm just going back into the water. I'm finding that I've got still paint on my brush. But look, the more water you get, the more it's called a wash. So the more you can move the paint around. Now, this is what I want you to experiment with, because on these different surfaces, different fabrics, different papers, cardboard, different colours, how does the paint work? Now, this is what I want you to tell me. There's something else in here. I put a pencil in. So you might want to draw some lines and see how the paint works on top of the lines. Or you might want to put the pencil in the water and see what happens to the pencil. Can you see how it's marking very differently? Experiment with the water and the pencil, because I think you'll find it's very different when it's in the water. An interesting combination. You could use your brush on top. See what happens. See what you can do to lines that have already been made when water comes off. I think basically what I'm saying is experiment. Can you see how exciting this is? As it starts to dry and because I'm holding it up, of course yours might be flat on a table, but if you've got a board or somewhere you could stick some paint, see how the water affects what's going on. These are all interesting things to find out, because of course I'm not asking you to create a perfect painting of something. I want you to know for yourself how the brush works and how the paints work. So there is an idea, and I will add this to the email that I send to your parents. If you're watching this separately, there is a download on my website to give you an idea of, I think it's called a creative session with paints. And what happens is I'm going to ask you, perhaps once you've got lots of paper, lots of different colours and things all over your paper, I've given you, can I see it? A piece of black cardboard. And a nice idea is, once you've got loads of experiments, loads of splodges of colour, loads of combinations, you might want to add pens, you might want to add loads of other paints that you've got. What you could do is you could cut or tear up your experimental work into just small pieces that you really like the shapes or the colours, or pieces that you really like the way it's gone on the paper. Best to do this once it's dry. And then perhaps you could add to the black paper all the different sections to create another completely different piece of work. I found one that we've done in a session before with, I don't know how many children there were. There probably were a lot, but look. So if I unroll and show you, this is just one small section of all the different pieces that they liked. Can you see how we're making a completely different piece of artwork just out of all their little experiments? Now, this is a great big roll. A lot of children did this all together. But just to show you the tiniest little pieces, when you put it against a different contrasting piece of paper, how interesting it can be. There's one here you might be able to see behind me. So this person, can you see this one? They took a very regular shape, a circle, and they cut, how many? 9 of the little pieces that they really enjoyed from a great big piece of experimental work. It's really interesting, isn't it? It's really lovely. Okay, so experiment with your brush, experiment with your paint, and let me know how you get on. I'd be really interested to hear if you've got different brushes, thick ones, thin ones. Can you make thin lines with thick brushes? Can you make thick lines with thin brushes? How does it work? How long does it take for this brilliant magic paper to dry so you can go again? What happens with the fabric that I've sent you with the lines on? How are you going to work with that? You're going to use the lines or ignore the lines? Maybe you've got some newspaper at home, something that's already got words on. If you put pen or paint on top of that, how does that work? Using a surface that's already meant for something else. Of course, just to say there are bits of wood and things in here, I think even some lolly sticks, which might be interesting to add paint, colour, lines, pencils to. See what happens. Anyway, I'm very excited to hear how you get on. Do let me know. Any questions, just put them in the comments below. I'm really happy to answer anything. And enjoy.